Hey everybody, welcome to the YouTube Scale Modeling channel. This evening we're going to do a detailed tape-up review of the brand new ICM 148 scale B-26 Marauder. It's a brand new kit and I've been working diligently on it, and in part one we're going to cover the fuselage, the clear parts, the wings, the tail, and the rudder, and how all that fits together. So let's get started. The main wings on the ICM Marauder, the plastic is fairly thin and flexible, so what I did was and I do this on a lot of kits, I laminated some 40,000 strip stock on the inside, and that helped tighten this up a little bit and make it stronger. These this is a three-piece, actually a four-piece assembly, but the instructions have you assemble this and this and this on the outside and then set it in place. The problem is if you do that, you don't know how this kind of sits in here, because there's some very, very shallow locating pins on the underside here. And so what I did was I used some tester's glue here, and that gave me a little bit of working time, and then I set it in place correctly, and I had to kind of play with it, and it popped out a few times on me, but I finally got it into place and let it dry. And then what I did was I pushed down on this side, hit it with some super glue, and then did the same thing on this side, pushed down and hit it with some super glue. The other thing is this cross piece here, you can see it didn't fit very well on this side. On this side it did, on this side it didn't. So this frame assembly is skewed a little bit this way, so just be mindful of that. Make sure to check the fit. So once it dried, then I put this back piece on, and there's a little bit of a gap here, and the way you close that up is you just kind of push down, and then you can put a few drops of super glue on the back side here, and that kind of fixes that problem. This piece, it's not flimsy, but it's kind of hard to get into position correctly. So what I did was I put a few tiny drops of tester's glue right on the inside of that lip, set it in place, and positioned it, let it dry a little bit, and then slowly push down and put tiny drops of super glue and kind of work my way down to the end. So that's how you do that. So on the horizontal stabilizer, again, it's a little bit, the plastic is a little bit thin, so I put some evergreen strip stock in there to tighten it up a little bit and stiffen it. But the parts go together really, really nice, and the elevators fit into their locations very, very tightly. And let me show you this one here. Not glue this up. I've got to get it onto the locating pins. Here we go. And pull this one out just to show you, nice and tight. And you can position them up or down a little bit. Now, on the control surfaces, everything fit together very, very well, nice and tight. You still need to run a bead of super glue around the edges and to remove the seams. On the aileron, same thing, nice and tight. A little bit of super glue in here, and you'll be set. The flaps, which are also separate, nice touch ICM. You've got a little bit of a gap on the inside areas, which you're really not going to see if you're going to have these closed or partially open. On the underside, you got to be really, really careful. You can see some of the glue seeped out on me because I used a little too much on here and on this part. And if you're careful, when you close this up, you really don't need to do anything. It's nice and tight. So I'll fix that with a fine grit sandpaper, and on this one too. So the rudder, same thing, two piece, nice and tight. Everything fits together fairly well. And I'm kind of curious how this is going to sit on the fuselage once I get a little further on my work here and see how that fits on there. Now when you tape up the wing and attach the flaps and the aileron, it looks pretty good, and it's nice and tight. And Everything fits together fairly well. And yes, there's supposed to be some gaps here where the flaps go up and down, a little bit of a gap here between this outer flap and the aileron. Now, with the reinforcing in place, this is nice and tight and it doesn't flex. However, here's the problem. So when you go to slide this in, and it's got these same extenders that come out from the bulkheads, like the old monogram kits, to help you set the wings in place correctly and add strength, but you're still going to get a little bit of this. So the way to fix that, just you got to form fit a piece of evergreen, thick evergreen strip stock on the inside here, just one piece. You want to make sure that you don't push it this way or crimp it this way. You just carefully slide it in, and you're going to have to form fit it into place. But once you do that and super glue it, it'll stop this from happening, and it'll make it very strong. So those are my thoughts and comments on the wing surfaces. So now I can go ahead and I can tape this one up and put the flaps and control surfaces on it, and then we'll start on the engine nacelles. But so far so good. I've got the fuselage halves taped together, and of course the first thing I noticed was the fact that this plastic is fairly thin, so you have to be careful taping it together. And some areas, like here, here, and here, there's no tabs for positioning. There's no alignment tabs. So you're going to have to be very, very careful when you glue these to make sure that everything lines up correctly on both sides. So with that said, I started with the Bombay, and of course first thing I noticed here was there's no positioning tabs for the bulkheads on either side of the fuselage for the Bombay. So what I had to do was I taped this side in place on one side of the fuselage and did the same thing on this side here, and then I carefully slid this top piece in place. Now when you do that, both sides of the top piece come out of the inside of the fuselage, and they line up right there on both sides and on the back right here. So I didn't see that at first, and I couldn't get the fuselage to close up correctly, and that's because this top piece wasn't set correctly. So I did that, and then let me go ahead and pull this out so that I can show you. Once I got it set all correctly, what I did was I used this thin wire applicator, dipped it in super glue, medium set super glue, and I ran a bead right along here. I did tiny drops at first to set it here and here, and then once I did that, then I ran a bead across here and here. So this is now pretty solid. This bottom piece, which is actually part of the fuselage, really, it's two pieces, and it fits together fairly well, but you still have a seam. And what I did was I glued it together with some slow set, and then ran a bead of medium set super glue along the seam line on both sides. And I've got a little bit of war work to do here, but that's on the inside. And then this piece goes in this hole and in this hole right here. So we'll go ahead and put that back. It's kind of a clumsy way to do it, but it does work. Hang on. I need to get it from the other side. And there we go. Almost got it. There we go. So yeah, it goes just like that. The other thing I did was these two aft bulkheads. I glued this one in place first. I positioned it. There's two tiny tabs on both sides here too. And so I positioned it correctly, checked the fit, and it looks pretty good. And then I put some tiny drops of super glue along here. And on this one, the opposite side, I put them right along here on the inside and on the inside right here. And so there's another bulkhead that goes here. There's a piece here. Now, the other thing I noticed was, and I didn't see this at first, there's a bend here. See how thin that is? That plastic is very, very thin and flexible right here, and it bulges down. I think this piece here will help push this down and make it stronger, but I won't know until I get that interior bulkhead in place and then glue this in. But I think it goes right there. But that'll be the next thing I'll work on. So there's a bulkhead here and here, and of course the fuselage floor. So, or not the fuselage floor, the cockpit floor. So far so good. I'm going to go ahead and I'll take the tape off and let's see how it looks. Actually, if you don't set these bulkheads inside the fuselage and do this roof, this is not going to sit correctly inside the fuselage because it's really easy to skew it. I don't know why they did it that way, but the instructions call for it to be assembled outside of the fuselage, and it doesn't work that way. Okay, almost there. Now, I'm going to use this tape again. I'll show you the thickness of the fuselage here. It's really thin. So you're going to have to be spot on when you put these, when you glue the fuselage sides. Otherwise you're not going to have a lot of thickness to work with sanding and shaping the plastic like on other kits. So we almost got it. And here we go. No. Need my trusty tweezers. That piece wasn't, like I said, it wasn't glued in place. So, and one more. Okay. So this, got some more tape here. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll put more super glue along this upper seam here and on this side, and that'll make for a really strong piece. And they tell you to also put the bomb racks in place, but you can do that after assembly. I've done that before and it works really, really well. So yeah, and here are the two bulkhead pieces. Now there's a third bulkhead, like I was telling you, and that third bulkhead, and I think it's this one, and it goes here. So I'll have to work on that next, and I think it goes just like this. So, and there's a tab on this side, so this is going to be a real challenge to get in place and get it straight, because there's no, like on the old Revell monogram kits, you usually have a lip on both sides here. So we'll have to see how that works. So that's what I've got so far, and it's looking pretty good so far, except you can see how thin this plastic is. It's very, very, the whole thing is just very flexible. So we'll go ahead and finish putting this together and then glue this bulkhead in place and see where we're at. I've got the aft bulkhead that I had spoken to on my last video glued in place, and then the other two pieces. So here's how I did it. I taped this bulkhead in place in its positioning tab, and this is the one for the port side. Positioned it, taped it, closed up the fuselage, taped the fuselage, and then I was able to get in there with my finger from this angle and through the opening here to get this pin to pop into place. Once that was done, then what I did was I was able to get in here with some, actually from this side, I hit it with just tiny drops of super glue right along here and let it dry, pulled it apart, and then put a bead of super glue along here and here. So that's how I did it. And this piece went in fairly easily. There is a ridge right on the inside of this, and so this is how this sits. It sits on the outside of this ridge, and there's a channel in here that it sits inside. So that fit together fairly easy. Now this bottom piece, the deck, was a little bit longer, so I sanded it down a little bit to make it easier to glue into place. So when you glue it into place, there's a depression here and here on both sides. So what I did was I put some tiny drops of Testor's glue here and here, positioned it, and the bottom of the deck sits right up against right here where these ribs stop. So you can see it better right there. There you go. So once that was done, and this popped up a little bit, so I just kind of held it down here until it dried. And then when it dried, then I pressed this area and this area together. See how that's bulged up a little bit? So, and then I hit it with a little bit of this, to me, extra thin quickset cement, and that laminated the two sections together, made it nice and strong, and straightened out this area here. So when I close this up, this will get pushed down a little bit, and then I can get in there with, when I put a bead of medium set super glue along here, it'll go ahead and laminate that. So it should work fairly well. So that's the aft end. Now, on the centerpiece, and I already talked about this, but I went ahead and glued this piece in place, positioned it properly, and then put some super glue here and here. Now, the one thing I didn't mention was this is the front side, and if you look at the instructions, it shows a hole here, but there's also a hole here. The hole on the left side faces to the front, so just a reminder of that. Not only that, this back piece won't fit up in this area very well. The other thing is that the instructions tell you to put this in place and then glue this plate and this plate in place. You don't have to do that. You can glue them in place outside of the fuselage, and it makes this assembly a lot stronger. Doesn't help you with this, but it does make this assembly stronger. So again, I hit it with some of this Tamiya extra thin cement along here, and of course you have to make sure that this is level with this piece here, and the same thing here. And then once it dried, I pushed these two pieces together and put a little bit of that Tamiya cement here and here, so that from the inside you wouldn't see any gaps on either side. So it now slides right into place. And again, as a reminder, this needs to be put together inside of the fuselage. Otherwise, if it's skewed just slightly, it's not going to sit correctly. So with the cockpit area, what I did was I taped this bulkhead into place in here, and then carefully positioned this piece in place against the bulkhead, closed up the fuselage, and then I was able to make some adjustments here to get this to sit right. So when you close up the fuselage, let me get this down where it's supposed to be, and then I can turn it. Again, these positioning tabs are not very thick. So when you close it up, that's what you see. Now, this bulkhead side for the landing gear bay and this bulkhead side for the landing gear bay are attached to this deck. And before you glue the deck to the bulkhead, with the fuselage all taped up, push down a little bit so that these sides butt up against the inside area of the fuselage. If you don't do that, there's going to be a gap here and on this side. So you kind of push down from this area here just a little bit, and then go ahead and run a tiny bead of that Tamiya cement here and on this side. Once that's done, then you can go ahead and hit it with some Tamiya cement here and here, just a little bit, because you don't want to mar this surface. And then I let that dry, pulled it out, checked it, and then hit it with some more the Tamiya cement under here, and then a tiny bead across here in order to make this part real strong. Excuse me. This piece does not sit very well inside of this area. And what you need to do is sand this upper area down a little bit so that when you put this back into place and then carefully position this piece, the tab on this one will sit correctly. See what it's doing? It's a little bit skewed this way. See, it's got a little, and you can tell from the interior ribbing here, it's not straight. And the reason is because you need to sand this down a little bit. And the only positioning tab you have is this one right here. There's no positioning tab here or here. You just you have to get this all in place. You tape up the fuselage, and then you got to play with this in order to get it set correctly. It'll pop in on this side. This side tends to pop out. And so once I got it set correctly, I hit it with some super glue here. I haven't sanded this down yet, but I hit it with some tiny drop of super glue here, and then on the inside here. And then when it dried, pulled it out, and then I installed this piece. It tells you to install this piece before you glue this to this. Don't do that. Install this piece after this bulkhead is glued into place. And you won't notice the bend or the slight angle of this once this is closed up. But again, if you want it straight, that's how you have to do it. You got to sand off a little bit of this top, otherwise it won't fit correctly. So that's all the interior bulkhead work I'm going to do. So I'm ready to go ahead and put this in place, and then kind of tape everything, hold it in place, and then close up the fuselage, and then we can check the wing fit. So yeah, we're moving along pretty good. So, and I'll be able to spray paint all of this, and then I'll be able to mask this off and spray this curtain a different color in this box and this box. This is tan, and this of course is black, and this is black. So you can assemble all this just like I've done, and then underneath here there's the 4 pieces, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And the other thing is the forward landing gear sits on these tiny cups here and here. I don't know how strong this is going to be because a lot of weight is going to be necessary. Having built both the monogram and the AMT B-26, it took a lot of weight. So you need to be mindful of that and make sure that you put enough glue in here. Otherwise, it's going to collapse on you. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts. And so far, construction is proceeding pretty good. Again, let me just mention one last thing. You can assemble the bomb racks, spray paint them, glue the bombs to the bomb racks, and then carefully put tiny drops of white glue here, 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 and here, and slip it down into the Bombay opening and position it and hold it in place, and it'll be just fine. And then there's actuator door parts here and here, and on the back here and here. All that can be installed after you glue this into place and after it's painted. So again, one last thing to remind you that Elmer's white glue works really, really well for small parts on flat painted surfaces. The glue bonds really, really well to flat painted surfaces. So I use a lot of white glue for small parts. So this part is now fairly strong. So I've got the fuselage taped up with the cockpit area installed in place, and the seams are nice and tight, and this is a separate piece up here. I don't know why they did this, probably for the slide molding somehow, but it fits fairly well, except the edges are very, very thin. And of course, the tree parts, the tree attachment points are right on the edge there. You can see that one there. So you're going to have to be very, very careful removing this and cleaning it up. And it's going to need bead of super glue all along the outer edge, just like the rest of the seams, but the fit is really tight. That's my tape loosening up, but it's pretty good. And in some places, it's really hard to see the seam. So yeah, this will be fairly easy to do. And I'll go ahead and remove the cockpit glass and check the fit, as well as the nose glass. So we'll see how it looks. But next up will be the tail. We'll check that fit. But I did notice that back here, this bulge on this side, I was able to fix it by laminating this interior piece to the bulge. On this side, what you're going to have to do is slide a piece of plastic in here, right there, and push it out. That's what you're going to have to do. Otherwise, it's going to look funny. So yeah, you got to definitely fix that flaw. And I think there's a little bit of something's missing. It's either something missing from here to here, or that needs to be cleaned up. Other than that, looking pretty good, and the fuselage halves fit together fairly well. Nice engineering on it. I've got the 3 main clear parts installed on the fuselage, and it fits pretty good. That's just the tape popping up there. Got a little bit of a gap right there that you can fill with some white glue. A nice touch here, the hatches at the top are separate pieces, so you can open them up and have a nice display of all of the great detail that goes inside the cockpit. The nose fits really, really well in place. Whoop, I hit the canopy again. And the tail also fits nice. Now back here, I tried trimming it, and you can see there's a little bit of a marring here. Don't do that like I did it. Sand it down, and it'll solve this problem right here, right there. So yeah, it fits. The canopy glass fits a lot better on this kit than on the Monogram Revell kit or the AMT kit. Much better fit. There we go. And yeah, I like it. I've got the horizontal stabilizer and the tail taped up, and it's looking pretty good. It's got a nice dehedral to it, just like on the real aircraft. Let me go ahead and pull this off for a second and show you how it fits. You've got a little bit of seam work here and here, and on this inner edge just a tiny bit, but when you press down right there, that seam almost disappears. And after you prime it, just a little bit of white glue I think will take care of that. And the same thing on this side, just a little bit of white glue. Now the tail, the back end of the tail, there's a positioning tab right here, and then this raised piece slips onto the inside of the tail, just like that. So again, I think it's a fairly tight fit, but what you're gonna probably have to do is you're gonna have to use some tester's glue. The way I'll do it is I'll put some tester's glue on the inside here so that these elevated areas will push the glue up, not out. And then that'll give you some working time to be able to properly position the tail. And again, I think just a little bit of white glue along the areas where there's a minor seam, and I think you'll be done. Now this is definitely an improvement over the Monogram kit, which has got a real bad problem with the tail. It takes a lot of work. And the AMT kit is not as bad, but when you set the tail down, there's like a void here and a void on this side. And the way I filled that, I just put several layers of Elmer's glue, and it worked. But you shouldn't have to do that. So by far, this is the best tail fit on the B-26 that I've seen. Not bad. Not bad at all. So it's looking pretty good. And of course you can position the rudder either a little bit this way or a little bit this way. So yeah, we're good. Really nice. In checking the fit of the main wing to the fuselage, you need to make sure that these extensions fit on the inside of these tracks. And also, my recommendation is you put tester's glue on the inside of these tracks and up along here on the upside, so that the tracks push the glue in. So when you do that, you get a nice tight fit. And on the bottom, you push down a little bit, put a little drop of super glue there, hold it in place, and then I think you can just fill that tiny crack there with some Elmer's white glue after you prime it, and you're done. Now on the other wing, same thing. Just make sure that it is on the tracks, and there you go. So you're still going to need, I still recommend you put a tiny bead of super glue along here. Just tiny, tiny bead. And that'll make this part really, really strong. Especially this piece that hangs out on the back right here. You want to make sure, hopefully you haven't broken it off like I almost did. You want to make sure that that piece is nice and strong. So yeah, a little bit of super glue, and you sand it smooth, and you're done. So you push it tight, you can't even see the seam. And what might work even better is some, to me, extra thin cement right along here. That might work even better. So, and the underside on this, again, is pretty tight. And again, just push down on this, put a drop of super glue in there, and then you can fill the rest of this with Elmer's white glue. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. And my tape is starting to come off on this engine nacelle. This one, there's something pushing it on this wing. I can't figure out what it is, but yeah, it's looking good. And the same thing on this one. You got something pushing it up. So you're going to have to force this down when you put some super glue in here to hold it in place. Hey everybody, thanks for watching part 1, and stay tuned for part 2. I should have it up in the next 24 hours. So with that, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and if you get the chance, visit our website at www.mikashy.com, where you're going to find dozens and dozens of free PDF downloads, all dedicated to scale modeling. Have a great evening.